I turned around in frustration, looking for the bag of chips and snacks we bought earlier from the store. We had laid James across the back seat to give him more room to rest. I nudged him a bit, saying, "Hey James, move over a little. The bags are under you." But James didn't move. He just lay there completely still. I didn't want to alarm Mom or Dad, so I kept quiet. I stepped back, grabbed the boy, shook him, and slapped him a few times like this, trying to wake him up. Suddenly he said,
"Oh my God, dude, you're annoying me. Fine, take your stuff and leave. Get out of here."
"Damn you, now you've made me lose it." Then I went back up front, and my dad looked at me, confused, and asked,
"What's wrong with you? Why did you come back? Why didn't James just hand you your stuff?"
I replied, No, it's nothing. It's just that there are a few things in the bag that James doesn't know where they are, and I didn't want to bother him, so I grabbed them myself. After driving for about 50 kilometers or less, I can't quite remember, suddenly, the steering wheel got heavy in my dad's hands, and the car started veering off by itself, swerving to the right. He pulled over, and we both got out. We found the rear tire on the right side had a nail in it and was flat. My dad said,
"Great, just what we needed. Go get the spare tire."
I asked him, "Dad, how did a nail even get in the tire?" He replied,
"No need to overthink it. We only got off the road once when your brother James needed to use the bathroom, so that's probably when we picked up the nail."
I got the spare tire, and we took off the flat one. My dad jacked up the car, and we were putting the new tire on when, all of a sudden, a car stopped behind us. Imagine who it was, the tow truck driver. I'm not even sure where he came from. Anyway, while we were still working on the tire, almost done with just 2 more bolts to tighten before we could get moving, he pulled up behind us. He started acting strange, scratching his head and making odd gestures, like he wanted to do something but didn't know how. My dad told him,
"It's fine, kid, you can go ahead. We've only got 2 more bolts to tighten and we'll be on our way."
But the guy didn't leave. Instead, he kept looking inside the car, and then his eyes met my mom's. At that moment, my dad, who was already suspicious of my story, became certain something was wrong. Plus, he has diabetes. Oh man, if you had seen what happened next. My dad had the tire wrench in his hand, and as I've told you before, he's got a temper. If something sets him off, he'll go wild. I immediately grabbed the tire wrench from him and tried to calm him down, saying, "Dad, calm down, don't blame him. He's not in his right mind." But my dad didn't care. He shoved the guy, grabbing him by the collar and pinning him against the car door. He started slapping and hitting him with his elbows, almost like he was about to kill him. My mom got out from her side, opened the door, and started screaming, pulling my dad back, yelling,
"You're going to kill him, for God's sake! Stop!"
If you remember, I told you this guy was really skinny, almost frail, and my dad, back then, was pretty strong. He was beating the guy senseless, clearly holding a grudge against him and taking advantage of the situation. After smacking him around, my dad grabbed him by the back of his neck, shoved him away, and said,
"Get out of here, don't let me see you again."
The guy didn't fight back at all. I don't know if it was because he wasn't fully in his senses or if he knew he was too physically weak to defend himself. You'd think it was over, right? That he'd get back in his truck and leave? Nope. My dad and I got back to tightening the bolts on the tire, and we were finally on our way. The whole ride back, we were getting lectures from my mom. I swear, if my dad hadn't told her to be quiet, she would have kept talking the entire way home.
What you guys did was terrible. Don't you fear God? Have you no humanity?
Let me tell you, if it wasn't for God, then me and Mark, you wouldn't have made it this far.
Anyway, we settled down, and we were just driving quietly along the road. Then suddenly, I spotted the tow truck driver again. He was parked on the side of the road, and there was another tow truck beside him. My dad didn't notice because he was focused on the road, and they were all the way on the far left, with their lights off. I couldn't tell if they were planning something, waiting for us to pass so they could follow, or if they had some other idea in mind. Only God knows. So I said to my dad, "Dad, do you mind speeding up a little?" He looked at me and asked,
"Why, son, is everything okay?"
I quickly replied, "No, Dad, everything's fine. I'm just getting tired of this long drive, and I want to get home faster." I didn't want to tell him the truth so he wouldn't get stressed, but that turned out to be a huge mistake. Listen to what happened next. After driving for a little while, I glanced back and saw nothing but darkness and calm. Thank God, I thought to myself. Maybe I'm just being paranoid. Maybe there's nothing wrong. So I leaned my seat back a bit and decided to take a light nap. Suddenly, I was jolted awake by my dad shouting. He was cursing and yelling.
"What kind of idiot drives like this?"
My dad, God bless him, had a real temper, and he couldn't stand it when someone tried to mess with him. So what did he do? He pulled over to the side of the road, trying to get the truck driver behind us to stop. My mom started pleading with him.
Please, we're on a long trip. Just ignore it and stop looking for trouble. When will you learn to calm down?
Move aside, get out of my way.
He leaned over, opened the glove box, and pulled out his gun. The moment my mom saw the gun, she started screaming.
Oh my God! Have some fear of God! Will you never learn? What's wrong with you?
She grabbed his arm, trying to stop him from getting out of the car. He pushed her hand away, still furious, and was about to get out. I jumped in and grabbed his arm too, and he told me,
Let go of my hand and stay out of this.
Now, I wasn't sure if this was the same truck I had spotted earlier with the tow truck or not. And honestly, I wasn't too surprised. This wasn't the first time my dad had done something like this on a road trip. Whenever someone messed with him, he'd stop and confront them. When my dad pulled over and turned on the hazard lights, the truck behind us stopped as well, keeping a little distance between us. While my dad was walking toward them, two huge guys got out of the truck. Foreigners, massive in a way you wouldn't believe. The moment my mom saw them, she broke down, crying uncontrollably. When my dad got closer to them and saw how huge they were, he reached into his pocket to pull out his gun, and sure enough, he drew it and pointed it at them, threatening them. I was still in the car, nervous, and my mom was beside me, crying and screaming. Even James had woken up. Then, in the silence of the moment, we saw the passenger door of the truck open, and out came someone. It was the tow truck driver, and he was holding a club. You might wonder, Mark, how could you just sit there and watch all this happen? Honestly, you can't imagine how much I tried to get out of the car, but my mom wouldn't let me. She held me back the whole time. Can you believe that my dad even locked the doors before he got out? I had no choice but to move into the driver's seat, thinking that if something happened, I'd unlock the door quickly and jump out to help. But my mom, God bless her, held on to me like a child, wrapping her arms around my waist, crying and begging me not to go. And to be fair, my mom's instincts were right. Imagine if I had gotten out. What could I possibly do against those massive men? We could have both ended up dead. So, what did the tow truck driver do? As soon as he got out with the club in his hand, he started creeping around slowly, trying to come up behind my dad. The truck was parked, and my dad and the two big guys were on the driver's side. So the driver sneaked out from the passenger side, moving quietly so my dad wouldn't notice. The moment I saw him, I stuck my head out the car window and started screaming at the top of my lungs, Dad, behind you! But he couldn't hear me. He was too focused on talking to the big guys, and with the noise of the truck's engine running, he couldn't hear a thing. As you know, when a truck's engine is on, even if someone is right next to you, you can barely hear them. The tow truck driver took advantage of the situation. He walked up behind my dad and, when he got close enough, hit him on the arm with the club. The moment he struck, my dad dropped the gun, and the guy immediately picked it up and pointed it at my dad's head. After seeing that, I couldn't just sit there. I'd rather die than let my dad's dignity be trampled. I tried to unlock the door and get out, but James grabbed me. Even though he was younger than me, James was stronger and more built, so he managed to hold me back. My mom was helping him too, and they both held me down while I screamed, Let go. They're going to kill Dad. He's going to die. Then James said,
Shh, listen.
And I heard one of the foreigners get on the truck and turn off the engine. The other guy stood behind my dad, while the tow truck driver pointed the gun at him, saying,
Empty your pockets. Give me everything.
My dad was standing there with his hands raised, and the foreign guys was behind him. When the tow truck driver got closer to check my dad's pockets, my dad suddenly shoved him away. You see, my dad had his entire paycheck in his pocket at the time. The tow truck driver, furious, yelled,
You pushed me this time, but if you do it again, I swear it won't end well for you. Let me search your pockets properly, or you'll regret it. Now raise your hands.
I'm not raising my hands.
Raise your hands, I'm telling you, this isn't going to end well for you.
I'm not raising them. Do what you want.
The tow truck driver gave a look to the foreigner guy behind my dad, who then grabbed my dad by the shoulders, pulling his arms back to restrain him. My dad struggled, trying to break free, but he couldn't. Then, as the tow truck driver moved closer to search his pockets again, my dad suddenly kicked him in the stomach, and suddenly,